Here is the next example. In this example, in the signal flow graph, we're finding the transfer function from the signal flow graph. So step 1, find all the forward paths. So step 1, forward paths. So let me take P1. So forward path is nothing but starting from the input, reaching the output without touching any node or any path more than once. So you can clearly see P1 equal to Z2, Z4, G6. Now P2, I'm going to find another path right there, Z3, Z5, G7. So I'm going to put another one, Z3, G5 and G7. Those are the two paths. Now P3, I'm going to put it right there, path 3. It's the same diagram. I'm going to, instead of using the same diagram, I'm using different graph for different path. So R, Z3, Z8, Z6. So we'll say, here is 1. So that's Z3, G8 and G6. Path 4, I can say Z2, G1, G7 and output. Path 4 is Z2, G1, G7. So these are the 4 paths we found, but there are 2 more paths. It's a little bit tricky to find those paths, but I'll go ahead and write it down here. Path 4 or path 5. Path 5 equal to, I'm going to go over, okay, here it is, R, Z3, Z8 minus H1 and then G1, G7, 1. So in this path, I'm not going any node more than once. Okay, and H1, that's a feedback path. It is also path. So this is nothing but G3, G8, okay, G8 minus H1, G1 and G7. So if I write it down properly, minus G1, G3, G7, G8 and H1. That's path 5. And path 6, equal to, I'm going to follow the same way but in the opposite direction. So path 6 is going to be, I'm going to start from there, okay, and G4 minus H2 minus H2, G8, G6 and output. Okay, so those are the 6 paths. So P6 equal to, let me write it down, G2, G1, I believe, G1 minus H2, G8 and G6. So if I simplify this, it's going to be minus G1, G2, G6, G8, H2. These are the 6 paths. Once we have 6 paths, then I'm going to find the loops. Okay, so step 2, find loops. Okay, so loop 1, it's going to be, you can clearly see G4 minus H1, L1 equal to minus G4 H1, and you can clearly see loop 2 equal to minus G5 H2. That's my loop 2. And loop 3, it's a little bit tricky one. So loop 3, I'm going to start from here. Can I go with this G8 minus H2, G8 and then minus H1? Okay, so loop 3, I have G1 minus H2 G8, okay, minus H1. So basically it is minus of minus plus G1 G8 H1 H2. That's my loop 3. Now I found all 3 loops. Now we need to find non-touching loops. Now we'll find step 3, 2 non-touching loops. 2 non-touching loops. Non-touching in the sense they shouldn't touch at a node, they shouldn't touch at a path. We just found that this is loop 1, this is loop 2. I can clearly see loop 1 and loop 2, they are not touching to each other at any point. Okay, and loop 3 is look like 8. Okay, this is the dotted line, loop 3. So loop 3 is touching to loop 1, loop 3 is also touching to loop 2. So loop 3 is touching loop. So basically I have only L1 and L2 are the non-touching loops. I don't have any more non-touching loops. And the next one is 3 non-touching loops. So here 3 non-touching loops are 0 because L1 L2 are non-touching but L3 is touching to both. So I would say none in this case. Now the formula for transfer function C over R equal to 1 over delta P1 delta 1 plus P2 delta 2. Since we have 6 paths, P3 delta 3 plus P4 delta 4 P5 delta 5 plus P6 delta 6 over, that's it. Delta is already in there. So our goal is first finding delta. Delta equal to 1 minus sum of the individual loops L1 plus L2 plus L3. Here I have only those 3 loops plus the multiplication of 2 non-touching loops, sum of the multiplication of 2 non-touching loops. So here I have only L1 and L2. I don't have any more, so I can say it's L1 times L2. Okay, so this is nothing but 1 minus, I have L1 L2 L3. Let me copy that. Okay, so here is delta. L1 is minus G4 H1, L2 is minus G5 H2, L3 is G1 G8 H1 H2, and L1 times L2 is multiply these 2 terms, so I end up with G4 G5 H1 H2. Minus of minus becomes positive. So this is final delta. Now we're going to find delta 1, delta 2, delta 3, delta 4, those things. So delta 1 equal to, we're going to copy every term in delta except which is touching path 1. So let me look into path 1. So here is the path 1, the blue line. So here is path 1. Now what we need to do to find delta 1, take the delta and eliminate every term which is not only touching the path, which is touching the path as well as the node. So if you look at G4 H1, G4 is in the path 1, so eliminate that part. G5 H2, okay, G5 H2, this is completely away from path 1, so for sure I'm going to include that G5 H2. It's none of the nodes are touching to path 1 and none of the paths are touching to path 1. Okay, so and then the next one is G1 G8 H1. So G1 G8 H1. So anyway, there is a node touching, so eliminate that path. And G4 G5 so G4 is already included, so eliminate that part. So delta 1 equal to 1 plus G5 H2, and same way delta 2 equal to, if we do the same thing, the red line is path 2. So if you look at path 2, I believe 1 plus only G4 H2 is not touching. No, sorry, G4 H1 is not touching. path 2, every other element or every other term is touching that path. Now delta 3, delta 4. Okay, so path 3, here is path 3. Okay, so here is delta. To find out delta 3, see, are there any elements, not only elements, nodes also are not touching that path 3. So delta 3 equal to 1 plus G4H1, that's touching that node, so eliminate that. G5H2, G5H2, that node is touching, so eliminate that. G1, G8, H1, H2, so that nodes are touching, that node is touching, so eliminate everything else. Delta 3. Delta 4, that's a green path. If you look into the delta 4, we will end up with the same thing here. So look at the green path, G4H1 touching that node, G5H2 touching that node, G1, G8, H1, H2 touching that node, and H1, H2 touching that node. So delta 4 equal to 1. Now if you remember, next path, so this is path 5. If you look into path 5, to find delta 5, see, every element, either element is touching the path or it is touching the node. So delta 5, you will end up with 1, and delta 6 is the opposite direction of this path, you will end up with 1. So we end up finding delta 1 to delta 6. Now the transfer function, C over R equal to P1 delta 1 plus P2 delta 2, P3 delta 3 plus P4 delta 4 plus P5 delta 5 plus P6 delta 6 over delta. Okay, now write down everything. I'm going to write it down offline. So here is the final transfer function. I'm not going to read it, but you can see that's P1 delta 1, P2 delta 2, P3 delta 3 equal to 1, so I didn't include that, P4, P5, P6, and the denominator is delta. Thank you. As I mentioned, you need to look into the forward paths and loops. Make sure you're not missing anything. Inspect it a couple of times. You will get it if you practice more and more examples. What I recommend you to do, watch my video a couple of times if needed. At least watch it once without pausing it or without doing anything. Second time, please write it down with me. What I'm doing, write it down to understand it better. Third time, do it by yourself without watching my video. For sure, you're going to stuck at 1 or 2 points at the time. Just do it, watch my video. And fourth time, fifth time, you should be able to do it without watching the video. If you practice it in that manner, 3-4 examples, you will gain more and more knowledge in this topic. I'll stop this video here. Thank you.